Let me ask you something. What happens when the handshake of diplomacy turns into a fist of pressure? What do you do when a so-called partnership starts to feel like a threat? That's not just politics, that's life. And right now, it's happening on the world stage. Today, we're not just talking about trade wars or headlines. We're talking about a shift in global energy. A moment where the United States slapped a 25% tariff on India, and Trump's frustration echoed far beyond the walls of the White House. But this isn't just about tariffs. It's about power, about trust, about how quickly alliances unravel when egos clash and agendas collide. In every corner of the world, in business, in politics, even in your own life, there comes a moment where pressure reveals character, where frustration exposes truth. And today we're going to break down what this moment means, not just for India, not just for America, but for you. Because if you understand how nations respond under pressure, you'll understand how you must rise under your own. Would you like to expand this into the first key point with a strong emotional arc? When a strategic alliance starts to crack, it doesn't always begin with a dramatic fallout. Sometimes it starts with silence, with tension, with decisions made behind closed doors that echo across borders. That's what we're seeing now in the US-India relationship. On the surface, it's a trade dispute, 25% tariffs, a political decision, a business maneuver. But beneath that, something more human is happening, a breakdown of trust. And that's something we all understand, whether we're president's partners or just people trying to make it through the day. Trust is not built by handshakes in front of cameras. It's built by consistency. It's built when words match action over time. For years, India and the United States presented themselves as rising allies, two of the world's largest democracies working side by side. Shared interests in defense, tech, economics, and even values. But when pressure enters the equation, whether political or personal, true priorities surface. Trump's decision to impose 25% tariffs on Indian goods may appear tactical, but emotionally, it feels like a breach. Not just for India, but for any partner watching. The message isn't subtle. Loyalty doesn't guarantee protection. Collaboration doesn't equal immunity. In that moment, a friend starts looking like a competitor, even a threat. That is how alliances unravel, not always by declaration, but by disillusionment. Now think beyond the world stage. Think about your own relationships, professional, personal, or even your relationship with yourself. How many of them are built on convenience instead of commitment? How many are held together by habit rather than by trust? Because when pressure comes, and it always does, it doesn't destroy the strong, it exposes the weak. India, in this context, is being tested, but so is America. Because every time you damage a relationship for short-term gain, you lose something harder to rebuild than any economy credibility. And once that's gone, you don't just have to negotiate trade, you have to earn back belief. This moment between the US and India isn't just about economics. It's a mirror reflecting how we handle pressure, disappointment, and power. Trump's frustration shows us what it looks like when control is threatened. India's silence or strategic restraint shows us what it looks like when dignity holds its ground. So ask yourself, when alliances in your life feel shaken, do you retaliate or do you realign with purpose? Do you hold on to bitterness or do you hold on to your values? Because in the end, it's not the handshake that defines a partnership. It's what happens when the handshake is tested. The foundation either cracks or it proves its strength. Never confuse loud moves for strong ones. Sometimes, the quiet ones change the course of history. Tariffs are never just about numbers. They're not simply percentages or pieces of legislation passed from one desk to another. They are signals, power plays, messages wrapped in economic policy meant to shake confidence or provoke recalibration. That's exactly what happened when the US decided to impose a 25% tariff on India. And to understand the real meaning of that move, we need to step out of the headlines and into the psychology behind it. You see, every leader governs not only through policies, but through emotion, through perception. Trump's approach to leadership, love it or hate it, is rooted in leverage. He views the world through a lens of negotiation, where pressure is currency. In that worldview, tariffs aren't just about balancing trade, they're about tipping scales. They're about reminding others who's in charge, or at least who wants to be. And that's where the deeper lesson lies. Because when you use force to prove your strength, what you're really revealing is insecurity. A confident partner doesn't need to flex muscle every time something shifts. True strength is knowing when to apply pressure and when to hold it, when to protect power and when to empower. Trump's frustration with India didn't stem from betrayal. It stemmed from resistance. India made choices, whether on defense deals, oil imports, or tech regulations, that didn't align with U.S. interests. And rather than work through that with long-term diplomacy, the response was instant pressure. 25% tariffs. That's not a conversation. That's an ultimatum. And here's the irony. The more you use tariffs like weapons, the more your influence erodes. Because while fear can produce obedience, it never produces loyalty. And any leader, whether of a country, a company, or a family, who relies solely on fear eventually stands alone. Now let's bring this home. How many of us try to control situations or people through pressure? We impose deadlines. We withdraw affection. We issue ultimatums. Why? Because it feels safer to control than to connect. It feels easier to demand than to dialogue. But control is brittle. It cracks under the weight of real resistance. Connection, on the other hand, is flexible. It adapts, it survives. What we're watching between the US and India isn't just trade tension. It's a clash of control versus independence. It's a reminder that every time we use force to get what we want, we risk losing what we had: respect, cooperation, trust. And so the message isn't just for nations. It's for all of us. If you want real influence, lasting influence, you must lead not just with pressure, but with principle. Not just with force, but with fairness. Because the loudest leaders may command attention, but it's the most grounded ones who truly move nations and hearts. When a nation stands at a crossroads, its silence can speak louder than its words. And in response to the 25% tariffs imposed by the United States, India didn't shout. It didn't retaliate with angry declarations or rushed decisions. Instead, it did something far more powerful. It recalibrated, quietly, strategically. Because in a world where every move is watched, sometimes strength is shown in stillness, not noise. India's choice to lean further into relationships with Russia and China isn't just about economic convenience. It's about autonomy. When one door closes, another opens. Not because the room changed, but because the occupant chose to move. That's the essence of sovereignty, the power to pivot without asking permission. And that's what India is doing now, pivoting not in weakness, but in wisdom. This isn't a betrayal of old alliances. It's the assertion of new priorities. India is signaling to the world that it's no longer the junior partner in global conversations. It's not waiting to be chosen, it's choosing. And that psychological shift is massive, not only for geopolitics, but for the way we all understand leadership. Too often, we equate defiance with resistance. But not every act of independence is a protest. Sometimes, it's a quiet declaration: I see where you're going, but I have my own direction. And that's where India's true power lies right now. Not in reacting to America's tariffs, but in redefining its own path forward. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, where in your life are you still waiting for someone else to set your course? Where are you waiting for permission to pivot when you already know the path you need to take? India's response is a lesson in emotional intelligence. Instead of mirroring the frustration, it chose strategic distance. That's not evasion, it's elevation. In psychology, we call this response flexibility, the ability to stay grounded when provoked, to think instead of just react. It's one of the core traits of resilient leaders, resilient nations, and resilient people. By deepening ties with Russia and China, India is not just hedging its bets, it's expanding its options. That's a mindset worth remembering. In life, when one relationship tightens, the worst thing you can do is shrink. What you should do is expand. Diversify your emotional portfolio. Build bridges in new places. Strengthen your internal economy, your mindset, your resilience, your self-worth, so that no external pressure can break you. This moment is not just India turning east. It's India turning inward, trusting its own compass. That's the example. So, if you feel pressure closing in, don't fight it with panic. Don't respond just to respond. Stand back, breathe, pivot with purpose. Because the strongest move you can make sometimes isn't to push harder. It's to step back, realign, and walk your own way. In moments of chaos, we often search for clarity, for certainty, for something, anything, that reassures us the ground beneath our feet isn't giving way. But what if the chaos itself is the clarity? What if the disruption is the message? When the United States imposed those 25% tariffs, the world didn't just see a trade shift. It saw a fault line in a global order many had taken for granted. Alliances don't last forever just because they once worked. Strategies grow stale. Partnerships evolve. And power, real power, doesn't just lie in preserving order. It lies in navigating disorder. India's response, its pivot toward other global powers, its refusal to lash out emotionally, is a case study in resilience. But more than that, it's a reminder of something deeper, that transformation doesn't always arrive through peace. Sometimes it comes disguised as pressure. And if you're too busy resisting the discomfort, you might miss the opportunity buried inside it. This is not just about foreign policy. It's about mindset. It's about how we handle unexpected pivots in our own lives. We all experience moments when the structures we trusted, a job, a relationship, a plan, begin to collapse. And we're faced with a choice: do we mourn what was, or do we step forward into what could be? Pressure reveals. It reveals cracks in systems, yes. But more importantly, it reveals character. We've seen this on the global stage now, but it plays out in quieter ways every day. When things fall apart, do you? Or do you rise, not in anger, but in awareness? India's movement away from sole reliance on the US is not a reaction. It's a reinvention. It's a realignment of identity, one that says, we are not just responding to the world. We are shaping it. That's a mindset worth adopting, not just for nations, for individuals, for you. When life applies pressure, you can take it personally, or you can take it as permission. Permission to reassess, to refine, to rise. That is the essence of psychological maturity, knowing that not all pain is punishment. Sometimes it's purpose arriving in a different form. Every shake-up in the world, whether political or personal, carries a hidden message: evolve or repeat, grow or grip tighter to what's already slipping. The nations, the leaders, the people who thrive aren't the ones who avoid the storm. They're the ones who walk through it and come out with a clearer sense of direction. So when you feel the world shifting beneath you, don't panic. Pay attention. Listen, that instability might be the very thing trying to show you a new way forward. Because in chaos, there is always a call, and the ones who answer it aren't the ones waiting for things to go back. They're the ones bold enough to go forward.